Yesterday, I introduced Project Freedom 46, 100 days of going all in on my business to find out what happens when I really focus on building the business and the life that I actually want. But before we get into what changes, what opportunities open up, we need to take a snapshot and a baseline to find out where I'm actually starting. And before we get into that, I do need to clear something up. So I'm not starting from zero. My business has a few arms, one of which is a consulting arm of my business. So I work B2B consulting with businesses and brands, helping them with their visibility, their online presence, their LinkedIn profiles, and yeah, help them to find leads and clients and generate revenue. Project Freedom 46 is not focused on that arm of the business. And I'll tell you why. Because I've already tested that I can get clients, I can work in that way. However, that type of work doesn't allow me to become free. It requires me to trade my time for money, essentially, right? There's only so many businesses that I can work with. If I'm delivering a strategy on a Zoom call, I can't work with another brand, another business at the same time. So for this project, the goal is for me to find out what happens when I go all in. Am I able to leverage the assets that I already have and free myself up essentially? Free myself to have more space, have more time doing the things that I want to do, to be able to spend more time with my family, to focus on my health while still building an incredible business that I love. Is that too much? Am I asking for more than the internet promises us is actually possible? I don't think so. I'm really interested in the assets that I already have. Can they do the heavy lifting for me? So, can my content, my communities, my email list, the digital products that I've created, can I leverage those as assets to bring in more income without every extra pound needing another hour of my time? Is that possible? That, in essence, is what this experiment is all about. And another thing that I want to be clear about, these 100 days of videos is not about me just telling you what I did each day. Essentially, I'm using me and my business as a case study. I'm going to be showing you what I'm testing, what happens, what flops, what works, what I learn in the process, who I become these next 100 days. And as I do that, I want you to start thinking about your existing business or the business that you're planning to build at the same time. Because if I can test something in public, right, hopefully you can learn from these experiments. You can learn without having to actually make the mistakes yourself, right? So let's get started as to where I am currently in my business. All right, so I built a dashboard so that we're not just relying on my memory over the next 100 days. So these are my starting numbers. My YouTube channel has 260 subscribers. My email list has 696. The LinkedIn Strategy Lab, so my community, that has 493 members. And then Lisa, the LinkedIn Sales Accelerator, has 18 customers currently. Then you'll notice something else. All the revenue figures, they show zero. And that doesn't mean that these things have never made money. I've deliberately drawn a line in the sand. The challenge started yesterday, the 8th of August. So every pound that's generated in the lab, in Lisa, with my digital products, and eventually, if I get monetized, or when I get monetized, right, on YouTube, from that day onwards, then that will get counted as Project Freedom 46 revenue. So that means when we get to day 30, day 60, day 100, will know exactly what's happened during this experiment. So let's start with YouTube, 260 subscribers. Now, I find this one to be really interesting because I'm a LinkedIn and a visibility strategist. I create content consistently. I've built an audience on LinkedIn. I teach people about visibility. Yet my YouTube channel has basically been sitting there looking at me like, and exactly what are we doing here? Right? I upload and then I stop. I upload again, then I stop. I go live, then I stop. I have not been consistent with YouTube. So I don't want to say that YouTube doesn't work. I have not been consistently working YouTube. And I think as well, because I utilize it largely for my community. So in terms of people scrolling on YouTube and looking for content, they may come across my video, but not necessarily stick around because it feels as though I'm speaking to an audience that they're not a part of. So, yeah, the way in which I have been using LinkedIn previously hasn't helped with me growing and expanding my presence on YouTube. And I think there's a really important lesson there because how many times do we say that something doesn't work when really we haven't used it correctly? We haven't tested it for long enough to actually know, does it work or does it not? It's the same with LinkedIn. People will say similar things. It doesn't work, it doesn't get me clients, but they're not using it correctly and haven't been consistent with it. So, yeah, maybe for you, it is a social platform. It's LinkedIn, it's Instagram, it's YouTube, whatever. Maybe it's with making offers. Maybe you're not consistently putting those offers out there. Maybe it's email marketing. A lot of people collect email addresses and then never say a word to those people on their list. So we try something for a short while, don't get results, and then we conclude it doesn't work for me. It doesn't work for my particular industry, my niche, my business. And that's basically what I've done with YouTube. So for the next 100 days, I am removing that one excuse, consistency, right? Because I'm going to be showing up for the next 97 days consistently. And then I'll have the data. I'll have 100 long form videos on the channel. I'll have the data to be able to help me to see what worked, what didn't, what people engaged with, how long did they engage for, where did they fall off, right? And the goal, as I've said, is to get monetized. But if I don't, then I've learned through the process, and I'm sure there'll be some value that I can extract from this time. So, if there's something in your business that isn't working, maybe pause and ask yourself, have I properly tested this? Have I used this correctly? Have I been dipping in and out? Because I know that that's the case specifically with YouTube for me. The next thing I want to get into is my email list. So currently I have 696 subscribers on my email list. And when I look at that number, I realize something. I have spent years building audiences on platforms that I don't own. I build on social platforms, in school communities. They're essentially on rented land, right? And those platforms, LinkedIn, school, Instagram, whatever algorithm, can change. They change their rules, they change the way, the features, the things that they offer. But my email address, however, gives me a direct way to stay connected with the people who have chosen, they've raised their hand to hear from me. Yes, they can subscribe, and I encourage people to do that if you no longer wish to hear from me, because there's a cost for you being on my list, right? But essentially, they have opted in. So, one of the things that I want to see with this particular experiment is, can all this extra visibility actually grow an audience that I own? Because I don't just want views, I don't just want hearts and likes. I want relationships with the right people. I want to move people from watching my content to joining my email list, getting to know me, getting to understand the problem that I solve, the way that I solve it, learning from me, and then making sense of whether or not what I offer is for them, right? And then eventually buying something from me. So whether that is a low ticket digital product, or it's a mid ticket course, or maybe they become one of my high ticket B2B clients, that journey can only happen, I think, with them being in my ecosystem. So 696 is our starting number. Let's see where that goes. Let's see what happens with that as I'm consistent in showing up on YouTube. So ask yourself, if your social platforms, whatever platform you're on, disappeared tomorrow, how many of the people that follow you and are connected with you could you still reach? Because followers are super valuable. However, if you have no way of contacting them and the platform changes their algorithm, like, it's wasted effort and wasted opportunity, because followers are valuable. But there's a difference between a follower and an owned audience. They are not the same thing. And I think that that is something that I personally, and perhaps you as well, let me know in the comments, need to actually take more seriously. We invest so much into these platforms and we don't own the land, we don't own the data, we don't own the relationship. The next two that I want to get into are my school communities. So the first one is the LinkedIn Strategy Lab. Now, this one gets interesting because the LinkedIn Strategy Lab currently has 493 members, and that number needs some context. So, I started the community back in 2025. When I started the community, I utilized a freemium model. So people could join the community for free and then they could upgrade to the premium tier or the VIP tier, um, if they decided that they wanted to get more proximity, quicker results, access to more resources. So there were two paid levels above that free entry tier. Then, about a month, maybe 2 months ago, school introduced a new incentive for school community members. So they essentially started putting their own money behind advertisement to get the communities on the platform more members. And from the messaging from the founders, and based on the way that I understood the changes, the paid communities were going to be prioritized and given those opportunities for the paid adverts. So a lot of community owners, including myself, moved away from the freemium model and opted instead for a fully paid membership. What I did was made that entry level $7 per month. At the time, my thinking was that it's an incredibly low barrier to entry. $7, which works out to about, I don't know, £5 a month. So you can come into the community, experience the training, join the conversations, see whether or not it works for you, and then decide if you wanted to upgrade to the premium tier. But here's what happened. Here's what I've noticed has happened. New joiners have slowed down. So I would get probably about 4 or 5 people per day requesting to join when it was the freemium. That has slowed significantly. So then what I did was I added a free trial, which means that you can get into the community for 7 days without paying anything. You give your card details, but you can get in and you decide whether or not you want to roll onto that £7, or if you went for the premium or the VIP, then you would roll onto that. And I have seen a slight increase in doing that, but I'm still questioning the model because at $7 a month creates an interesting problem. It is cheap, but it is still paid. So someone does have to make a buying decision. So they have to decide whether or not they see value in what's being offered, in whether they trust me enough to join. So essentially, I have created a level of friction that wasn't there before. And then another question I'm asking myself is $7 a month too low? And it's not because I all of a sudden want to be charging people loads of money, but from a perception point of view, if I'm saying that the community offers strategic direction, live support, Q&As, access to my expertise, does $7 a month help people to actually see the value? Or could it be actually making them question it? There's a whole conversation around the price and the value and perception. But I think if you are charging a low ticket for whatever your offer is, it's something for you to sit and think about. Is that low price actually making it easier for people to say yes? Or have you ended up in this weird middle ground where there's enough friction to stop people actually taking the next step and joining or entering your community, but also the price is low enough that it starts to affect how they actually value what's being provided, what's on offer? I don't know the answer for the lab, and I think that's the important bit. I don't know. And this process will hopefully get me to that point of clarity. But I'm also not seeing anything at the moment that makes me think, wow, these ads are changing the game for my community. So now I'm asking myself an uncomfortable question. Did I change my business model that was actually working because the platform changed what it wanted rather than me actually making the decision that was right for my business? So going back to that whole thing of building on rented land, school changes, LinkedIn changes, YouTube changes, and we naturally tend to respond. But there's a difference between adjusting your marketing because of changes on a platform and then allowing a platform to dictate your business model. What's good for school isn't necessarily automatically good for Shalina's business. So that's something that I'll be watching over the next 100 days. I want to see how many people sign up for trials, how many people stay on beyond the 7 days, how many people are ascending from the standard to the premium tier. I want to see who stays. I want to see the revenue. And then I can make a more informed decision based on what is actually happening. Then we have Lisa. So Lisa is my more recent community. Lisa stands for the LinkedIn Sales Accelerator. Currently, we have 18 customers, and I call them customers because Lisa isn't necessarily a community like the lab is. Lisa is a one time investment for access to a program with AI prompts and video trainings and resources, and it's self led. And when I look at that number of 18 customers, I have another uncomfortable question to ask myself because I have been in the weeds, in the details of creating these prompts that are weighty with my experience the last 3 years of building strategies on LinkedIn. I've gone into the detail, but what I haven't done so well is actually marketed Lisa. So I've spoken about it and I've shared Lisa inside of the LinkedIn Strategy Lab and to my email list. But beyond that, I've not really mentioned her. And I'll be honest, I think this is something that experts tend to do. We create something, and rather than actually giving it the time and the attention to market it, what we do is pour everything into it, put it out once, and then we move on to the next thing. And that's essentially an error on my part. I know the amount of work, the amount of intellectual property that I've baked into Lisa, the results that are starting to filter through from the customers inside of that community. My hypothesis for Project Freedom 46 in regards to Lisa is I don't actually need to build more. I need to get better at actually distributing and actually marketing and selling what I've already built. I love creating. I'm always coming up with different ideas, different challenges, different offers. Meanwhile, I've got this incredible asset that's kind of sat on the shelf that nobody knows about. You might be similar as an expert. You might love that process of coming up with solutions to problems, but not actually sharing those solutions with the people that it can actually help. So before you move on to creating another product, another lead magnet, another challenge, another whatever it is for you, ask yourself, have I actually been diligent, been intentional with marketing this existing offer that's in my hands? What have I done with that? Have I talked about it enough? Have I shared it with the right people? Have I given it enough time to actually bear fruit? Because sometimes creating feels very comfortable. And when it comes to selling something that already exists, we often take a back step. So, again, we're going to find out whether this is actually one of my problems. And then the final thing that we're going to be tracking are my digital product sales. Over the years, I've created a number of digital resources, digital products, courses, ebooks, replays, anything you can think of. I've probably created it, and some have sold, some have not, and some have probably spent far too long in my Google Drive gathering what I call digital dust. And I'm including my digital product revenue into this experiment because this is another part of the freedom that I'm going after. Can something that I've already created solve a problem for somebody and generate me revenue without me needing to show up and to be physically present or virtually present every single time? And again, perhaps the question isn't what else could I create, but it's more of what have I already created that deserves another look. So when I look at the dashboard, the numbers themselves aren't actually the most interesting part of this. What is interesting is the story that they might actually be telling me. And I've got a few theories. The first theory that leaps out to me is that I may have built too many things. I've spent a lot of time creating, and maybe I haven't spent enough time actually extracting the value from the things that already exist. The second thing that comes to mind is that the pieces of my business may not be connected well enough. LinkedIn over here, YouTube over there, email over there, the lab, Lisa, digital products. Yeah, they all exist, but do they operate in one clear ecosystem? I'm not yet convinced that they do. The third thing is that I have allowed the platforms to influence some of my business decisions. The lab is the perfect example. School introduced its incentives and I changed my model. Now I need to figure out whether that change was right for me. And the fourth hypothesis, I think, is actually the biggest one. Too much of my business still needs me. I can consult, I can coach, I can deliver a masterclass, I can work with clients. All these things are valuable, but they still only want me. So if freedom means more choice over how I use my time, I need to start understanding whether the assets I've built can start producing more without requiring a matching increase in my hours. And before I finish, I don't want you to leave this video just knowing more about my business. I want you to take the time to actually look at yours. So here are the 4 questions that I'm asking myself. You may want to also do the same. Have I built too many things? Are there offers, products, programs, ideas everywhere, but very little focus? The second question is, am I properly marketing what I already have? Or am I creating the next thing before people have even had a chance and an opportunity to see the last thing? The third question that I'm asking is, do the parts of my business actually connect? Does my content lead somewhere? Does my audience know what the next step is? Do the offers actually make sense together? And then finally, have I made business decisions because a platform wanted me to, rather than what was actually right for my business? I don't have the perfect answers to these questions yet. And that's essentially what this challenge will hopefully unravel. So, this is our starting point: 260 YouTube subscribers, 696 email subscribers, 493 members inside of the LinkedIn Strategy Lab, 18 Lisa customers, and the Project Freedom 46 revenue counter starts at zero. But I'm starting from a really good place because I have assets, I have expertise, there's things that I've already built. And the question for the next 100 days is, can I make them work better together? If you're building a business from your expertise as well, subscribe and come along on this journey. I'm Shalina and I'm making daily videos for the next 97 days. And while you're here, tell me in the comments which of those four questions actually made you stop and look at your business differently. I'll see you tomorrow.